Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Game of Thrones Season 5 prediction video. In this video, I'll be giving my specific predictions on what I think is going to happen in Season 5. This is a spoiler-heavy book reader-only video since I'll be talking about specific events that occurred in the books in which the show hasn't covered yet. A lot of these predictions are based off of my assumption that Book 4, Feast for Crows, and Book 5, A Dance for Dragons, will be spread out over the course of the next two seasons. I get more into this in my pacing video, which if you haven't checked out, you should check it out. There's a link in the description below. Let me start by saying that I've seen a lot of other videos referring to themselves as preview videos of Season 5, which I don't think is entirely accurate, since those who have read the books have an idea of what's coming, but they don't know for sure. The show has been making changes from the books, and those changes are getting more dramatic, and I expect, because of the nature of A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons, the next few seasons will bring about more changes yet. If there's a pattern you can notice from how the show adapts the books, it's that it tends to consolidate characters and storylines. Those who've read the books first sometimes get a bit upset over the amount of characters that have been cut from the show, but those who haven't read the books will often think there are far too many characters for a TV show and too many to keep track of. As this is a TV show that caters for a TV audience and not catering just for people who have read the books or are looking for an adaptation, the show will have to stand on its own, and the way it does that is by cutting back on the amount of characters in the books. What works for the books doesn't always translate to the show. So, rule of thumb I based a lot of my Season 5 predictions on is that the show will try to consolidate characters and storylines where it can, and if existing characters can serve the purpose that a new character in the book serves, then they'll just stick with the existing character. I'll also say that I'll be a bit surprised if even half of my predictions come true. I didn't have a very good track record with Season 4. Every time I thought the show would differ from the books, they actually did the same thing as in the books. Such as when Daenerys kicked out Jorah and when Arya left the Hound for dead. When I thought in the show would follow, where I thought the show wouldn't do those things, they did, but when I thought the show would follow the books, for example with Lady Stoneheart, it didn't. But I'll give it my best shot. However, one thing I've been historically right about is the pacing of the show, which I get more into in my other video. However, I don't get into specifics there because I wanted to avoid spoilers in that video, whereas this video is all about spoilers. So let me explain more of what I mean by A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons will be split over two seasons. So my predictions are based off of what the show has done in the past. So a good thing to look at is how A Storm of Swords was spread over two seasons. It wasn't split straight down the middle, a nice, clean, even split. Some events happen out of order. The Red Wedding happened 3/4 of the way through the book, yet it happens in the first half of the two-season split. So they pushed it a bit earlier so they could have a big climatic moment for Season 3. The order of a lot of events were swapped around. Jaime and Brienne returned to King's Landing before Joffrey was killed. Arya spent less time with the Brotherhood without banners and a lot more time with the Hound. Samwell and Gilly returned to the Wall well before the Wildlings attacked, and in fact before Jon Snow did. Stannis got backing from the Iron Bank before going to the Wall rather than after, so on and so forth. I would say almost all these changes resulted from practical reasons of splitting the book in two. They naturally had to change the order of things, and the different storylines moved at different paces, and a lot of filler that wasn't in the books was added so some storylines didn't get too far ahead of others. And some material from the books was from the future books were included to fatten the stories up. So, what does this mean for the next couple of seasons? Well, Since book 4 and 5 happened concurrently, adapting them into 2 seasons will be kind of like spreading one book over 2 seasons. Some of you might think that, well, it makes no sense to split book 4 and 5 in half because the first half would really have no big climatic moments, and you would be correct. But looking at the above example of how A Storm of Swords was adapted into 2 seasons, I think it's safe to assume the process of spreading Feast and Dance over 2 seasons will be similar. Some events will occur out of order, some earlier, some later, others will be divided over 2 seasons. A lot of show created filler is going to be added to some storylines, and material from the next book will be added to other storylines towards the end, covering those 2 books. So here's my predictions on what the big climatic moments of season 5 and 6 are going to be. Season 5 is going to end with Cersei being put in chains by the High Sparrow. Although there's been some casting rumors out that they are filming a scene with her walking naked down the street. So they might actually end with that. But if they are filming that, I would say that would be her last scene of season 5. And it will end with Reek becoming Theon again. And some sort of resolution to the Dorne storyline, which will be very different from the books. And mainly, season 5 is going to end with Daenerys riding Drogon. Season 6 is going to catch up to the Winds of Winter by like episode 7 or 8. The reason I predict this is because The Dance with Dragon actually ends in an odd place. Many call it a cliffhanger book, and in fact it seems to end right before a lot of shit's about to go down. In fact, George R.R. Martin was said he had originally intended to include a lot of those conclusions in The Dance with Dragons, but the book just got too big, so he had to push it to the next book, and he promises that a lot of these big battles and story points will be concluded at the start of the Winds of Winter. My guess is the show won't divide it up the same way and will choose to have all these big conclusions that are at the start of Winds of Winter and at the end of season 6. So season 6 will end with the Battle of Meereen, the Battle of Winterfell, Cersei's trial by combat with Robert Strong, and again, like A Storm of Swords, a lot of non-book stories are going to be created to fatten up certain storylines so that they don't get too far ahead of others. So let me go through the locations I think we'll see in season 5. We'll see King's Landing, Winterfell, the Wall, north of the Wall under the weirwood where Bran is, Braavos, Sunspear, Meereen, locations in the Vale, and maybe the Riverlands as well. We'll get Pentos in the first couple of episodes, then Volantis in the later half of the season, and maybe, just maybe, Deepwood Moat and The Last Hearth. Places we will not see in Season 5 include the Iron Islands, the Shield Islands, White Harbor, River Run, Old Town, and the journey down the Rhone River. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing it right. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'll give more of an explanation on why we will or will not see these places in Season 5 as I go through each location to make my specific predictions. So let me start with the ever-important King's Landing. I've heard it said King's Landing will not feature as prominently as it has in previous seasons. I can understand why one might think this. A lot of characters that maintained King's Landing are now gone. Tyrion's gone, Varys is gone, Littlefinger's gone, Tywin's dead, Joffrey's dead, Oberyn's dead, Lady Olenna has left, and like in the books, Jaime is likely to leave King's Landing, though I think for a different destination, but I'll get more into that later. So that doesn't leave very many characters we're familiar with left in King's Landing, mainly Cersei, Tommen, Margaery, her brother Loras, and their father Mace. So I can see why a lot of people may think we won't be spending as much time in King's Landing, but I disagree. I think King's Landing will be in the forefront of Season 5, but will take more of a back seat in Season 6. I think Cersei and Margaery's battle over Tommen and thus the throne will be the central storyline of season 5, one which I think they've been setting up for a while now. One thing the show's been really good at is expanding upon non-viewpoint characters we don't follow in the books and giving us a lot more character actions and interactions and conversations that we don't necessarily see in the books. So I would expect to get a lot more from Marjorie's perspective than we did in the books, and I would expect their struggle to take up a lot of screen time and be the central focus of the season. So I mentioned the main characters we'll see in King's Landing, so let me get more into the minor characters. So we'll definitely get Qyburn, as they've already been featuring him. I think his part will be very similar as it was in the books. He will be Cersei's right-hand man, as it were. I think this was definitely indicated in the Season 4 finale. The High Sparrow has been cast and is said to be an important character, so we'll definitely get that storyline with the Sparrows. I think that will be another King's Landing storyline that will take up a lot of screen time, and we'll see a lot of the High Sparrow this season. As for the other characters, I'm going to be a bit more speculative because we don't know yet, and I'll say we will probably get Lancel Lannister back this season. My prediction for him is that in the show he will be, for the most part, take the place of Onsi Kettleblack. The show has yet to include Kettleblacks, and I don't think they'll start now. As I said before, the show tends to not introduce new characters if ones they have will do. And in this case, I think Lancel is the only character we know whom Cersei has been having an affair with. Plus, Lancel wasn't as injured in the show at Blackwater as he was in the book, so I think his storyline will be different. Although, as I inferred, he can't fully take Onsley Kettleblack's place because I doubt Cersei would send Lancel to seduce Marjorie, but he could be involved in some other plot with Cersei and then get caught and tortured by the High Sparrow. And once he's tortured, that's when he'll make his conversion and become a born-again religious freak for season 6, and thus turning on Cersei. Another character I think we might see again is Kevan Lannister. It's more of a hope than anything else. Kevan has appeared in the show already in episodes at the end of season 1 in which he was advising Tywin at the War Council meetings, and in an episode of season 2 where he was also advising Tywin, this time at Harrenhal. I would really like to see his return. Now, in the books, he was featured quite importantly in The Storm of Swords, and yet he did not appear in either season that covered that book. However, I believe it's because he was easily replaced in those seasons by Tywin, whom they would want to feature more prominently. However, now that Tywin is dead, I think they need a surrogate for Tywin, and so now they may bring in Kevan Lannister back. However, my prediction is that he won't simply just disappear and refuse to help Cersei, but will stay on as Hand of the King. He will advise her against her rash decisions, but will ultimately go along with them. So far, the show has just established him as an advisor, not as brash authority figure like he is in the books. So I think he'll continue to play that role and will become more prominent throughout season 5 so audiences get more familiar with him. So that in season 6, when Varys shows up and kills him, it will have more of an impact. So I think Kevan will advise Cersei against her stupidity, but won't be as forceful about it as he was in the books. But once she's in chains, he'll be free to do things properly and try to amend the alliance with the Tyrells, which of course Varys won't like and will kill him. So that does mean I don't think Harris Swift will appear in the show. He was a minor character who was only brought in to be a hostage for Kevin's sake, but since Kevin doesn't factor in the show yet, that's definitely not going to happen. So I think they will forgo Swift in favor of Kevin. I also don't think we'll see, I don't know if I pronounce his name right, Arion Waters. He was the master of ships. I think the small council will consist of Cersei, Kevan Lannister, Qyburn, Maester Pycelle, and perhaps one other yes man. Maybe Adam Malbrant, who appeared in an episode of season 1, and apparently he's set to make another appearance this season. The small council has been smaller in the show than it was, has always been smaller in the show than it was in the book, so I think 5 people would suffice. And in season 6, once Cersei is locked up, Mace Tyrell will join the council again. Another minor character we might see is Tina. I think I pronounced that right, Tina Merryweather. Although I think her role in the show will be much smaller. She will serve as Cersei's spy to Marjorie and perhaps her new companion as well. Getting on to major characters in King's Landing, Cersei's storyline will play out pretty similar as it did in the books. It's already been confirmed that Maggie the Frog is making an appearance, and they are casting for a young Cersei as well, so it looks like we're going to get a flashback, which is pretty out of character for the show, but I think it might occur in the form of a dream. So that tells me the prophecy is going to play a part this season. We might see a few sellswords giving her random dwarfs' heads and claiming it's Tyrion. I think her fall from grace will be just as spectacular as it was in the books. Marjorie's role is going to be a bit different from the books, mainly because they aged her and especially Tommen up, which completely changes the nature of their relationships, adding in a sexual element to which they teased in season 4. Tommen, rather than being a little child crying for what he wants, will be a defiant adolescent who grows more defiant as Marjorie starts to turn him against Cersei. Loras Tyrell, I think, will also play a similar role to the books. I think the attack on the Reach will go ahead, as in the books, although I think the attackers will be changed. I'll get more into that later. So, I think his attack on Dragonstone, where he gets severely injured, will also happen. Mace Tyrell, I think, will not go to Storm's End, and he will remain in King's Landing, but not have that much to do. The last character I would mention, who's near King's Landing in the books but not in it, is Bran. I think he will be in King's Landing for the show. However, and his storyline will play out similar than it did in the books, where Cersei tries to have him killed and it backfires on her. It's confirmed that his new bride, Lily Stokeworth, will be making an appearance this year, so I think she will be a part of that storyline. I would love it to death if she has a baby that Bran names Tyrion. That was just so awesome in the books, and that would make even more sense for the show. But I don't know if it would be practical for her to be having a baby so soon, since it hasn't been established she's already pregnant like it was in the books, but it could still happen. So now let's move to the next destination, Dorne. So it's been confirmed that they are definitely having this storyline in Dorne, which they will film in Spain. It's confirmed that Prince Doran will appear, as will his son Tristan and his betrothal Marcella, as well as 3 of Oberyn's bastard daughters known as the Sand Snakes, Obar, Tyene, and Nymeria, and Doran's personal guard, Irohota. It has not been confirmed that Doran's daughter, Ariane, I think I'm pronouncing it right, and Doran's son, Quentin, will appear. In fact, according to HBO's website, Tristan is the heir to Dorne, which to me is pretty clear-cut that Ariane and Quentin will not appear, and Tristan will be Doran's only child. And if Ariane isn't appearing, I don't think Aerys Oakhart nor Darkstar will appear. They are aging Tristan up to 18 in the show and simultaneously aging up Marcella from her established age earlier in the show, much in the same way they did with Tommen in season 4. It is rumored that Obar San will get an epic fight with a major character whom she did not encounter in the books. It is also rumored that Jaime Lannister will be in Dorne for season 5, and that's a rumor I happen to believe, but I'll get more into that later. So overall, I think the storyline in Dorne will be very different from the books. I think Doran's secret plan to send Quentin to marry Daenerys, which was the big surprise for A Feast of Crows, will be eliminated from the show altogether. Instead, his master plans will more directly involve the Lannisters. I think the Sand Snakes will take the place of Ariane Oakheart and Darkstar in terms of planning to crown Myrcella. In the books, the Sand Snakes barely appear. They each have one conversation with Duran, then he locks them up, and they're not seen again for the rest of A Feast for Crows. That, I think, is changing for the show. I don't think they'll just get locked up. I think they'll play a bigger part in the show. Getting back to Jaime Lannister, it makes sense to me that he will be sent to Dorne. I get more into that when I get to the Riverlands, but there are specific reasons as to why I think he won't be sent to Riverrun and instead will go to Dorne. I think it will make sense to have Jaime because they're going to want us an established character in this storyline. The show isn't going to just introduce a new location with new characters and no one we recognize except Myrcella, who doesn't really count because she's barely appeared in the show. In fact, that was one of the major complaints about A Feast for Crows, that the Dorne storyline as well as the Iron Island storyline introduced too many new characters and didn't have any familiar ones we could follow. And I don't think they'll make that same mistake in the show. I'll talk about the Iron Islands later, but as for Dorne, it makes sense that they'll use Jaime. In fact, I think it's possible he might be the character who fights Obar, although he wouldn't stand that much of a chance because he just has his left hand. There's also rumored that Bran will also go to Dorne. That rumor I don't buy. For one, Bran is not that important of a character to require him in Dorne. And for two, the fact that Lolis has been cast tells me that it's more likely his storyline will play out with her in King's Landing. So what I think will happen is once Tywin's dead and Cersei has taken over, she's going to order Jaime to go get Myrcella and bring her back to King's Landing under the guise of visiting. But Cersei has no intention of sending her back, much like she was going to do in A Dance with Dragons. Because with Tywin dead, she will have there will be no one there to force her to honor her agreements with Dorne, which she has always been strongly opposed to. When Jaime arrives in Dorne, he'll find Myrcella doesn't want to leave because she's in love with Trystane. And then the Sand Snakes will try to steal her away, much as Arya did in the books, and Jaime will try to find her, which will lead to this fight. So I'm not sure how the rest will go down. I'm a bit uncertain about this, but I think it will lead to pretty much the same place in the books eventually. There will be some conclusion at the end of season 5, perhaps with Duran telling the Sand Snakes his real plan, whatever that may be. And then in the 6th season, he will send them off to the missions, much like he did in the books. I don't think Myrcella will get her ear cut off, which would change the dynamics a bit. So, I think this storyline, as well as King's Landing storyline and Meereen, will be the main focus of season 5. I think there's enough material between just those 3 storylines to keep them well busy for season 5, leaving plenty of Dance of Dragons material left for season 6. So next we go to the Riverlands, which I'm not entirely sure we'll see. If we do see, it will be through the eyes of Brienne, and I think there's about a 50% chance she'll go to the Riverlands and a 50% chance she'll go to the Vale, which I'll talk more about when I get to the Vale. So I don't know what reason they could give in the show for Brienne going to the Riverlands, since the last we saw her, she was in the Vale, traveling to the Eyrie looking for Sansa, who in fact is there. But she ran into Arya, who left on a boat to Braavos, so it's possible that she will travel back to the Riverlands looking for Arya and somehow gets under the mistaken impression that she went that way. Perhaps that will lead her back there. I don't think anything from her Feast for Crows storyline will be covered in the show, since it was highly regarded as highly boring. It's possible that she will run into the Brotherhood Without Banners because they were established in season 3, so we should see them again. Although the word from Michelle Fairley is that there will be no Lady Stoneheart. I know some people are still hoping there will be, and I think it's possible that maybe she will appear at the end of season 5, since although she appears in the Storm of Swords, it's an epilogue that doesn't involve any other major characters, and and she doesn't appear after that until the very end of Feast for Crows, where she's only in one chapter, and she doesn't appear at all in A Dance with Dragons. So basically, she's hardly in the book so far. So they could have just been delaying her because of that. But I doubt it. I put the odds about 90% that Lady Stoneheart does not appear in the show ever. Meaning, if Brienne meets the Brotherhood without banners, it will be under different circumstances. So let me talk about Riverrun and why I don't think it will be in the show. In the books, Blackfish did not go to the Red Wedding and stayed behind at Riverrun. So when the Red Wedding occurred, he held Riverrun for the Starks, leading to the siege of Riverrun, which Jaime had to solve. However, in the show, Blackfish was at the Red Wedding. However, Roose Bolton did mention to Walder Frey that Blackfish escaped because he was out peeing when the killing happened. He was, however, not in Riverrun in order to hold it. In fact, in Season 4, Brienne mentions to Podrick that Walder Frey is the Lord of Riverrun, meaning he already holds it. So there's no need to have the Siege of Riverrun, the Freys already got it. Also, in the books, the Siege of Riverrun ends with Blackfish escaping. So it seems to me the show has already shortcut this. And in both cases, the end result is Blackfish being on the run. In the books, I think it's implied he will join the Brotherhood without banners, since they are causing havoc and going around killing Freys, which is something he can really get behind. So I think the same will happen in the show. So it's possible Blackfish will be with the Brotherhood in the show. He will be sort of a surrogate for Lady Stoneheart, where he will be the one threatening Brienne's loyalty and threatening to hang her. Although he couldn't very well send her on a mission to kill Jaime if Jaime's in Dorne, so that part might change. So next, we'll go to the Vale, where Sansa, Stark, and Littlefinger are. Sansa and Bran are two storylines that have very little book storyline left to draw from. They have each essentially one chapter left, so a lot of people are thinking they're going to get into Winds of Winter storylines next year, but I don't think they will. I don't think we'll be seeing any Winds of Winter material next year. So what I do think they'll do with Bran and Sansa, then again I look back at season 3 and 4 as examples. What did they do in the cases where certain storylines got too far ahead of others? Well, they created filler, such as with Arya and the Hound. They kept the two of them together, gave them more conversations, more bonding. And the second thing they did was they created entirely new storylines for them to do that weren't in the books, as was the case with Craster's Keep. They wanted to push back the Wildling battle to the end of the season, so they created a whole new storyline for Jon Snow to keep him occupied. So that's what I think they'll do in the case of Bran and Sansa. They will get into Book 6 material a bit earlier than other storylines, just like Theon Reek got into Book 5 material before anyone else. But I don't think it will be until Season 6 for either of them. Season 5 will be completely Winds of Winter free. In the case of Sansa, I think they'll Craster's Keep it and keep up a completely different, come up with a completely different storyline for her to do to keep her occupied in season 5, and in season 6 they'll bring in the Winds of Winter stuff. It does seem that they're taking Sansa in a completely different direction than the books anyway. A lot of the specifics will change because most of her storyline in The Feast for Crows is about her looking after little Robert Arryn, who they aged up considerably for the show, so that dynamic will be different. I don't think they'll introduce many more Lords of the Vale than they already have, and I don't think they'll do a storyline about Littlefinger trying to kill Robin to get Sansa to marry this dude who will technically be next in line. I think they'll bypass that by simply having Sansa marry Robin Arryn, who's aged up for the show. Where season 4 left off gave one the impression that Littlefinger is looking to make the Vale a viable force in Westeros, which is something that the books hasn't addressed at all yet. So I think their season 4 storyline will be completely off the books. A storyline, involving that. Also, last we left them, it looked like Littlefinger and Sansa were preparing to tour the Vale. So that's what I think they'll be doing in season 5. What will actually happen is beyond me, but I do think it will involve as little character introductions as possible. So, earlier about Brienne, I said I thought there was a 50% chance she would get to the Riverlands and a 50% chance she'll go to the Vale. Because the reason I was thinking that is because, hey, she's already there. So her original plan was to go to the area to see if she could find Sansa or Arya. She ran into Arya by the Bloody Gate, which didn't work out for her, so it's possible she might continue on to the area to look for Sansa, who will likely be gone by the time she gets there. So my theory is that Brienne will learn Sansa is in the Vale and go on a quest to find her, and then somehow get involved in Sansa's storyline, which would give her and Littlefinger other established characters to play off of. Next we go up to Winterfell, where the Boltons have taken up residence. So I do think they'll play out Ramsay's marriage to fake Arya, similar to what they did in the books. However, I think they'll get more into this when I get to the Wall, but I don't think Stannis will be attacking Winterfell until season 6. So I think they will segregate the two storylines. They will not happen concurrently like they did in the books. So here's what I think will happen. At the end of season 4, Arya and the Hound approached the Bloody Gate, and the Hound announced to the guard that Arya Stark is still alive. So basically, I think this will become common knowledge that to Westeros that Arya is still alive, where before it was thought she was dead. So upon hearing that Arya is definitely alive, but her current whereabouts unknown, as it's assumed she's hiding, the Boltons are going to come up with a plan to present a girl around the same age as Arya, who's a refugee from Winterfell, perhaps her name is Jane Poole, and pass her off as Arya Stark. And they'll get Reek to go along with it, and pretend to be Theon, who grew up with Arya Stark, in order to vouch that this person is actually Arya Stark. In the show, the Boltons know Rickon and Bran are still alive, but are unable to find them, so I think they will create their own Stark instead in order to lay a legitimate claim to Winterfell. As Mance Raider I think the show will bypass the storyline with him pretending to be dead, and then having swapped appearances with the Lord of Bones, who isn't really in the show. And instead, Stannis will know he's still alive, but send him to Winterfell as a spy / saboteur, for on the Boltons as part of a peace agreement. As for Wyman Manderley, as I alluded to earlier, I don't think the show will go to White Harbor, and I'll get more into that, what I think they will do with Davos later. However, I think Wyman may still make an appearance, but in a much smaller capacity. He will simply be a minor character who's very critical of the Boltons and constantly fighting with the Frey representative, adding tension to the situation. The Frey will be a Frey that they've already established in the show. And again, will be a minor character just there to squabble with Manderley. Perhaps Lothar Frey or Black Walder. So I think a lot will play out as it did in the books. They'll get snowed in at the wedding. People will start getting murdered. Pandemonium will break out. And Reek will become Theon again through Bran talking to him through the weirwood tree. I think the show is going to do that scene in a manner which is apparent. Bran is talking to Theon through the weirwood tree. So I think the season will end with Reek helping fake Arya escape and becoming Theon again. Season 6 will follow the Boltons and Winterfell leading up to the battle with Stannis, which will happen at the end of the season. Just a note, it's been confirmed that Roos's wife, Walder Frey, will be in season 5, and I think she'll be another noted guest at fake Arya's wedding. just like she is in the books. So speaking of Theon, let me get into what I think will happen with the Ironborn. As I alluded to earlier, I don't think we'll see them in Season 5, although I do think we might get the news that Balon has died, which is already long overdue. I think we'll get the Ironborn in Season 6, and that Theon will return to the Iron Islands at the end of the season, and we'll see things like the King's Mood through Theon's eyes. Remember what I said about Dorne, how they didn't want to explore a new location without a familiar character. Well, the same goes for the Iron Islands. I don't think Yara is enough. So I think Theon will need to become Theon again by the end of Season 5 and escape Ramsay's Grass and be on his way to return to the Iron Islands. I think he'll reunite with Yara at the end of Season 5, perhaps similar to how they met in the books. And then we'll return to the Islands by the start of Season 6, where we'll meet new characters like Iron, I think it's Iron, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, Iron Greyjoy and Damphair. I do not think Victorian will appear in the show, though, as will the whole storyline with the Dragonhorn going to Meereen to get dragons. As I alluded to earlier, I think it won't be the Ironborn who attack the Reach like it was in the books. So what will the Ironborn do in Season 6? Well, I think they'll just regain a new strength and wreak havoc in Westeros, perhaps taking the place of Aegon and Jon Cunnington, whom I think won't be in the show. Has a major faction in Westeros. I also think they'll introduce the Ironborn in Season 6 because they won't want to introduce two new locations, the whole slew of new characters in the same season. They'll do Dorne in Season 5, Iron Islands in Season 6 with Theon there. So next, let's go up to the Wall. The first thing I'd like to note is this is one storyline that hasn't even finished the Storm of Swords material. So I've seen some predictions. I predict that Season 5 will end with Jon Snow being stabbed, but I don't think so. Seeing as how they're not even caught up on the Storm of Swords yet. I think the Wall will take a bit of a backseat this year. Alright, let's just start with Jon Snow. I think we'll begin the season with Sam trying to get Jon elected as Lord Commander, which will happen midway through the season, maybe by episode 3 or 4. The rest of the season will deal with them deciding what to do with the wildlings they took captive and sending Mance on the spy mission I mentioned earlier. I think they'll explore a relationship with him and Melisandre, like what was in the books and was hinted at the end of Season 4. It's also been confirmed that they're having Varamir Sixskins in the show, who's a character who rarely appears in the books. And his purpose is to explain warging. So I think they will play him up in the show, similar to what they did with Orell, and he will become a character that Jon interacts with, and the show will make up a plot involving him that will be Jon's primary focus after he gets elected Lord Commander. The show is yet to explore Jon Snow's warging abilities like in the book has done since book 2, so I think the show will take the opportunity to do that this year, and they will use Varamir Sixskins to help accomplish this. This will prepare Jon to warg into Ghost when he's stabbed by the Night's Watchman at the end of Season 6. Perhaps in this season, Jon will try to reopen the abandoned castles and have them manned by wildlings. Samwell and Gilly will start at the Wall this season. Sam will be involved in getting Jon elected, but once he's elected by episode 3 or 4, he'll be sent off with Gilly and Maester Aemon to Old Town, and will spend most of the second half of the season in Braavos, which I'll get more into when I get to Braavos. But I will say Season 5 will end with him and Gilly arriving at Old Town, but we won't actually see Old Town until Season 6. So I don't think we'll get introduced to Vale or Dalla or Mance Rayder's child at all in this show. They haven't done anything in the show to indicate these characters exist, and I don't think they'll start now, which means I think they won't have the storyline with the baby swap involving Gilly's baby. With Pip and Gren dead and Sam going off to Old Town, Dolores Ed will become Jon Snow's new right-hand man, who will who will back him up on everything. The part of Bowen Marsh, I think, will be played by Alistair Thorne. In the books, Bowen Marsh follows Jon around and questions everything he does. They already have a character who does this, Alistair Thorne. And as I said earlier, the show won't introduce new character if they already have one who can serve the same function. In the books, Alistair Thorne doesn't do much other than go on some ranging and disappear. So in the show, I think they'll keep that character around since we already know him rather than introducing a new one. And he'll be the one questioning Jon's every order, which makes sense. Joining him will be Othal Yerwick, I think is his name, who is the first builder who made an appearance in Season 4 and is confirmed to appear again in Season 5. He will be supporting Alistair in his bitching about everything Jon does, and in Season 6 he'll support Alistair in stabbing of Jon Snow. Now it does bring a bit of a different dynamic to have Alistair stab Jon Snow because it's a bit more obvious coming from him, but I thought it was pretty obvious that Bowen would do it in the books. Although, also, it makes, he makes no secret of the hatred he has for Jon Snow. It would still be a giant leap for him to stab a fellow brother of the Night's Watch, especially the Lord Commander. So I think it will be a hard decision for him to make, and he'll be torn, but ultimately he'll decide to do what he feels is best for the Night's Watch. Tormund Giantsbane will appear in his cell several times this season, and towards the end of the season he'll be released and sent to gather the rest of the wildlings and bring them back to the Wall for peace. A storyline I think that they'll follow up on in Season 6. Stannis will spend the first half of the season at the Wall dealing with the wildlings. However, before I get too much into Stannis, let me point out that there's already been a major change in his storyline, and that is that he already has the backing of the Iron Bank of Braavos. At the point we're at in the show now, in the books at that point, he is yet to gain their backing. When Jon Snow in the books found out that Stannis was going to get the backing of the Iron Bank of Braavos, he noted that Stannis was going to be unstoppable. Which means currently Stannis is a much stronger position in the show than he was in the books. So I think that it's going to be him who will attack the Reach, not the Ironborn. I don't think he'll personally attack the Reach. He'll send others to do it. And by others, I mean Saldor San, who they made a point of showing in Season 6, of pointing out that he will be recruited by Stannis, and yet he wasn't at the Wall. So maybe it's because they sent him and a fleet of ships to attack the Reach, which they'll do next season. So why would Stannis attack the Reach and not King's Landing? Well, it would be less guarded and a bit easier to attack. Also, he would still hold a grudge against the Tyrells for being the only group that supported Renly and did not go to his side when Renly died, unlike all the other supporters. Instead, they supported the Lannisters and were directly responsible for his defeat at Blackwater. So I think he would want to send a message to all other houses to not support the Lannisters, or else they'll be attacked. Also, if Stannis attacks the Reach, this would explain why Cersei would be so hell-bent on taking Dragonstone away from Stannis before sending the fleet to help out the Reach. While some of his forces are in the Reach, he'll attempt to secure the North and will meet similar results as he did in the books. Stannis will spend the first half of the season at the Wall, but then, like he did in the books, he'll decide to take Deepwood Motte and back from the Ironborn to win the North over. In Season 6, he will set his sights on Winterfell and defeating the Boltons in order to gain control of the North. I can't pronounce his name, sorry. Tycho Nestoros, the guy from the Iron Bank. He's set to make another appearance in Season 5. However, I think this time it will be in King's Landing to find out why Cersei stopped paying her debts. And then when she refuses, he will give even more aid to Stannis to help ensure that he defeats the Lannisters. Davos will also spend the first half of the season at the Wall, which, by the way, he never actually went to Castle Black in the books, just Eastwatch. So we might get some choice interactions with him and Jon Snow, or perhaps Sam Martelli that weren't in the books. However, when Stannis attempts to make Jon Snow a full Stark and give him Winterfell, when Jon Snow turns him down, he'll tell him about Bran and Rickon still being alive. Something he did not know in the books, but he knows in the show. It wasn't stated in the show that Sam or Jon knew where Rickon was headed, but that could have been information that was revealed off screen. So Jon will tell Stannis that Bran is way off in the north, no one knows where, but that Rickon was headed to the Last Hearth. So Stannis will send Davos to the Last Hearth to find Rickon. And we'll bypass the whole storyline with White Harbor, because I don't think they'll introduce another grand location like White Harbor for just a few scenes. So Davos will go to the Last Hearth instead and meet up with some Umbers, perhaps even Great John Umber himself. In the books, he's being held captive at the Twins, but in the show, that was never stated. We, in fact, never saw Great John after Season 1, so perhaps he wasn't at the Red Wedding, or perhaps he was taking a piss like Blackfish and managed to escape. In either case, he made his way back up north, and Davos will meet up with him at the Last Hearth, and this will be a very short, simple scene that will basically be like the Super Mario type thing, where he just says, "I'm sorry, Mario, but the princess is in another castle." Great John will explain to Davos that Rickon never made it to the Last Hearth, and it's rumored that he's being held on Skagos, and that if Davos saves him, he will support Stannis, and also promises to rally the whole North to support Stannis. So Season 5 will end with Davos setting off to rescue Rickon, which will be covered in Season 6. I don't think they'll bother with the Karstark's betrayal, or their internal politics, or the Karstark girl marrying the Magnar Thin. I think all that will be cut. So now let's go north of the Wall, where Bran is hanging out under a weirwood tree. Bran is another storyline I mentioned earlier. It's pretty much out of book material to draw from. But with Sansa, I predicted they would do Craster's Keep It. With Bran, I predict that they were Arya and the Hounded. That is, they will draw out that one chapter they have to draw from and create a lot of filler. I think they'll go into more detail about the Three-Eyed Raven, Brynden Rivers, and go more into his background. We may also get more conversations with Leith and go more into the Children of the Forest and who they are. And we'll get more of Bran being trained, but most importantly, we'll get more visions. In fact, I think they may use Bran this season to explore some past events that haven't been explored at all yet. For example, Jon Snow's true parentage. If the common theory is true, and I believe it is, they'll need to explore more in the show who Rhaegar and Lyanna are, which hasn't really been covered yet. To be clear, I don't think they'll reveal Jon Snow's parentage this season, but I do think Bran will see visions of Rhaegar and Lyanna, and they'll explore them a bit more. And of course, Bran's storyline will accumulate with him talking to Theon through the tree and getting him to remember who he was. So it's time to go across the Narrow Sea and go to Braavos, where Arya Stark will learn to be a faceless man this season. Word has it that the actor who played Jaqen H'ghar is set to reappear this season. I personally hope this means he will be taking the place of the kindly man. I've been wanting to see an Arya and Jaqen reunion, and it seems they've been hinting at this for a while. Jaqen seemed to imply more in the show that she should seek him out in Braavos. Also, I feel that they had a much closer relationship in the show than they did in the books. Also, remember what I said about the show not introducing new characters if old ones will do? Well, other than that, I think her storyline will be really similar to the books. The waif has already been confirmed to make an appearance this season, so we know we'll see her. I think it's possible they might go all the way to her Dance with Dragons material, since that's a sort of a better stopping point for her, with her graduating from killing someone with a different face. Now, as to Sam, I think they will get stuck in Braavos, much like they did in the books. Maester Aemon will become sick. I'm starting to wonder if they'll include Darren. Was it Darian? I think his name was. Yeah. I wonder if they'll include him. I think they kind of have to, since he's so important to Arya's storyline. It's a nice callback that she would kill a Night's Watch deserter, as her father would. So I think they will have him. It'll also be pretty cool to see him get into a brawl with Sam. As I said, I don't think they'll have the baby swap storyline. Perhaps something else will happen between Sam and Gilly to cause strife. Perhaps Sam plans to send Gilly to his family and claim that little Sam is his bastard. Gilly would get upset over those plans because he said that he'd never leave her, but Sam doesn't want to break his vows to the Night Watch. But they'll end up hitching a ride to Old Town, but perhaps with the same guy who gave Arya a ride to Braavos, since that character is set to appear in several episodes this season. So Maester Aemon will die on the boat ride, and Sam and Gilly will end up having sex shortly before they get to Old Town, convincing Sam not to send her away, which was where the season will end for him. And season 6, we'll see Sam in Old Town, and we'll meet Maester Marwyn. So next we get to Pentos, where we'll start the season with Tyrion and Varys. I think we'll see Tyrion and Pentos in the first 2 episodes. Then Tyrion will disappear for an episode or 2, then reappear in Volantis. So the big change the show has already made is Varys has gone with Tyrion across the Narrow Sea. That I think is mainly because the show didn't want Varys to disappear for 2 whole seasons, as he barely appears in the Feast for Crows and the Dance with Dragons. I think they'll still go to Illyrio's house. He will make his first appearance in the show since season 1. However, I think Varys will play the part of Illyrio did in the book. He'll explain to Tyrion the whole plan they have. So Illyrio he'll still be there, but he'll have a smaller role. They'll explain to Tyrion that they've been working all along to put Daenerys on the throne, which will actually be a pretty big surprise for most show watchers, and it will come as a big revelation. Varys and not Illyrio will accompany Tyrion to Volantis. However, we won't get a big journey like we did in the books. And Tyrion won't meet all these extra characters like he did in the books. And sadly, I think this includes Griff and young Griff. Leaving them out will be a major change from the books. In my opinion, the biggest change yet. Since by the end of Dance with Dragons, they are a major force in Westeros vying for power. I think they will be snubbed out, however. I must confess that when I first heard that Rhaegar's son was still alive, which was actually before I read the book, and that he has more of a claim to the Iron Throne than Daenerys, and that he gets to Westeros before she does, I felt a bit cheated. That we spent all this time getting to know Daenerys, and out of nowhere this other guy appears, who apparently has a greater claim than she does. I know many people think he's really a Blackfire and not actually Aegon, and I'm not sure if I buy that, but either way, I don't think he'll appear in the show. For one thing, if they were going to cast John Cunnington and Aegon, I'm sure we would have heard something about it by now. Since, we haven't, I'm taking this to mean that they will be cut from the show altogether. So next we'll move to Volantis, which I'm really pulling on seeing in the show this year. I'm excited to see it I'm as excited to see it as I was for seeing Braavos in season 4. Now, Volantis has already been established in the show. through the character of Talisa Stark. So show watchers already have a bit more familiarity with Volantis than book readers did at the point where they got to Volantis in the books. The biggest mention of Volantis is that it was a slave city, which is why Talisa moved to Westeros, because she was against owning slaves and didn't want to live in a place where that was practiced. So because it's already been established as a slaver city, I think it makes sense that they're not going to be none too happy about Daenerys destroying the slave trade in Slaver's Bay. And so they'll send a large force to deal with her. So I think we'll see Tyrion in Volantis a lot more than we did in the books. I think Tyrion will arrive with Varys and Volantis and meet up with Jorah, much like they did in the books. Jorah will initially capture Tyrion like he did in the books, but Varys will catch up with him and explain his plans to help Daenerys. I think that the fact that Volantis is sending a large force to Meereen will not be common knowledge like it was in the books. And Jorah will feel he needs to get to Meereen first in order to warn Dany of the incoming threat. For some reason or another, I'm not sure yet, but Varys will, at this point, book passage back to King's Landing while Jorah and Tyrion head over to Meereen. On their way to Meereen, their ship will get caught in the storm. They'll be captured by slavers. Their Season 5 storyline will end with them being sold into slavery and bought by Yizan, who I'll get more into later. In Season 6, Tyrion and Jorah will escape slavery, join the sellsword company who works for Yunkai / Volantis. That sellsword company won't be called the Second Sons, but Ben Plum will be the commander of that company, and Tyrion will convince him to switch sides. Unfortunately, I don't think Penny will be appearing either. I get the feeling she'll be cut from the show and is fairly unimportant. I just feel if she was going to be in the show, they would have emphasized her more at the dwarf joust. So I think she'll be cut from the show altogether. I definitely think Jorah will meet up with Tyrion, and they're going to play this relationship up a lot more than they did in the books, because I didn't think Dany would kick Jorah out in the show like she did in the books, since the circumstances were very different. But the fact that they did tells me that they're setting up Jorah to meet with Tyrion. There were also rumors floating around that Jorah wouldn't appear in Season 5 at all. Those rumors appear to be false, as Ian Glenn is confirmed for Season 5. So, in our final destination, we get to Meereen, where, in my opinion, the show is set up quite a different situation than was set up in the books. In the books, Dany just defeated Yunkai armies, but didn't actually sack the city. In the show, she actually sacks the city. After she left, however, they managed to retake it. But in that case, it doesn't seem like it does seem like they're not as strong of a position as they were in the books. Although in Season 4, Dany sent Daario and Hizdahr zo Loraq to deal with Yunkai. Hizdahr to negotiate, and Daario to use force in case negotiations fail. I think Hizdahr will easily negotiate a peace with Yunkai, but that will be a ruse, and I'll get more into that later. So, overall, the show will upplay the internal threat of the Sons of Harpy more rather than the external threat of Yunkai. It's already pretty much been confirmed that the Sons of Harpy will be included in Season 5, and apparently they're going ahead with the storyline of the stalwart Shield, who is an Unsullied who is killed while laying with prostitutes. So I think the Sons of the Harpy will be played on a bit more than they were in the books, and Yunkai a bit less. I think the leader of the Sons of the Harpy will be none other than Yizan. In the books, he doesn't appear much. He just buys Tyrion and then gets the plague and dies. But I think they're really going to outplay him in the show. He was a big part of the Comic-Con new character announcement, so that right there tells me he'll have a bigger part to play. The HBO website describes him as a slave trader who lost a lot of money when Daenerys destroyed the slave trade. So that right there sounds like he'll have big reasons for wanting her downfall. In the books, there really isn't a face to Dany's opposition, just organizations, the Sons of Harpies, the Yunkai. For the TV show, I think they'll be wanting to put a face to Dany's opponent, a nemesis, if you will, and I think they've chosen to do Yuzan. So I think he'll appear as an outspoken opponent of Daenerys, but she probably won't be aware or able to prove that he's in charge of the Sons of Harpy. As for Yunkai, this is how I think it's going to go down. Hizdahr and Daario will return from Yunkai and report that they worked out a truce. So basically, this is the truce that appears at the end of the Dance with Dragons. I think they will bypass a lot of that and go straight to the truce. Because in the show, Dany isn't as weak as she is in the books. For most of the Dance with Dragons, she is in danger and completely surrounded. This, I think, will change for the show. In fact, I would say it's already changed for the show. Another aspect is the fact that Daenerys has the Meereenese fleet, their navy of 93 ships. Whereas in the books, the fleet escaped before she took Meereen. So not only does Dany not have the fleet to defend herself, her enemies have less ships. Dany's threat this year will be more of a steady decline or downward spiral, which I said she's already begun in season 4, but it will escalate with the Sons of Harpy. And when Hizdahr reports to have set a truce with Yunkai, Dany will feel better about herself, but little does she know that it's just a ruse. Yunkai just wants to buy more time to get reinforcements from Volantis and New Gis. And once those reinforcements arrive, they will then advance on Meereen and break their truce. This will happen at the very end of season 5. In fact, they may first sack Astapor like they did in the books, and then they'll turn to Meereen. Qarth, however, won't be mentioned in the show because in the show, Qarth isn't really a major city like it is in the book. It's just this tiny little crappy place that Dany left in turmoil. So that's not going to figure in the show at all. Daenerys will most likely marry Hizdahr like she did in the books, and this I have no doubt because there'd be no other reason to call the character that appears in the show Hizdahr zo Loraq, since at the moment he bears no resemblance to him. Hizdahr in the books simply whined about fighting pits, whereas in the show he was sincerely upset over his father's death. And he comes off to me as a totally different character. He seems a bit more dodgy and whiny in the books than he does in the show. He seems a bit more sincere in the show. I think Daenerys will ultimately marry him to stop the Sons of Harpy killing. And the very final scene of season 5 will be Hizdahr and Dany's wedding, which will be an outdoor wedding that will be crashed by none other than Drogon, who will light some animals on fire, and Dany will end up jumping on his back and going for a ride. I expect that to be one of the biggest big budget blowing scenes of the season. Anyway, so I don't think the fighting pits will be included in the season. Like I said, Hizdahr has not been linked to the fighting pits like he was in the books, and the dragons were locked in some catacombs rather than fighting pits, so I think the fighting pits are being completely cut out. So they'll replace Drogon's riding scene to be at Daenerys' wedding. And in season 6, Daenerys will only appear in every other episode for about the first half of the season, and we'll just be fucking around with Drogon and the Dothraki Sea, and we'll eventually meet up with the Dothraki Khalasar. Meanwhile, Barrister will be trying to keep the peace in Meereen and maybe arrest Hizdahr like he did in the books, and the killing will get worse. I don't think Daario will be held captive. I think they'll forego that part so that he and Grey Worm and Missandei will be the main characters we'll be familiar with, who will be there advising Barrister Selmy. I don't think we'll get the shave plate in the show. That's another character I think will be cut out, and it will end with the big battle that will happen in episode 9 of season 6. As I said, I think Quentin is being eliminated from the show altogether, so I think Yuzan will get in, he'll get in, he'll take over that part, because he'll get it in his mind once Dany disappears and is assumed dead to try to steal the dragons. And either he or one of his minions will get burned in the attempt, and that's when the dragons will escape and run amok. I also said earlier, I didn't expect the Ironborn to be involved in Meereen storyline at all. Part of the reason for this is because the aforementioned 93 ships that Dario compensated from the Meereenese navy. 93 ships is pretty much the exact number of ships Victorian's fleet had at the end of the Dance with Dragons. So it seems that the show is bypassing the storyline with the Ironborn, who's giving Dany a fleet to sail back to Westeros, by already have given her that fleet. So my guess is by the end of season 6, she will use that fleet to sail back to Westeros. So my final prediction, let me say that maybe instead of having one battle sequence like they did for Blackwater and the Watchers on the Wall, they'll change it up for season 6 and have an episode split between two battles, between the battle Stannis and the Boltons at Winterfell and between the battle at Meereen, and spread the battle into two locations. But just focusing on those two battles. That way they can spend the same amount of money that they normally spend on one battle on two battles. Anyway, that's it for my prediction video. Like I mentioned before, I'll be surprised if I get at least 50% of these predictions right. I'll be making updates to this video as more information comes in, which may contradict or perhaps confirm some of my predictions. Thanks a lot for watching. Please comment below. Tell me whether you think any of my predictions will come true, or perhaps give some predictions of your own. Although, check out my Season 5 pacing prediction video if you haven't already. The link will be in the description below. Thanks a lot for watching.